Hey guys, Guy Britton here with Ilio. Thanks for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to show you how I use the Gem Tape Desk from Overloud to add more character and life to my mixes. Let's jump in and take a look at what's going on. So the track we're working with today is very much a kind of acoustic pop thing that's driven by the drums, the acoustic guitars, the bass, the vocals. And one of the things about this track is that all of those parts were all recorded in home studios by the guys who played on the track. So whilst it sounds nice, it sounds clean, it sounds bright, it maybe lacks some of that flavor that you would get if you were recording in a bigger studio with an analog console and some outboard gear. And all of these signal paths that impart some harmonic saturation onto the elements of the track, which gives it kind of a bit more depth and a bit more flavor. And this is where the Gem Tape Desk comes into its own, because we can use it to impart some of that character on more sterile digital recordings that have been recorded directly into an interface at home. So let me play you a bit of this track, and then I'll show you how I use the Gem Tape Desk on key elements of the track just to give it a bit more flavor and a bit more depth. Let's take a listen.
You know I've been saving up for a place for us. Maybe just a few years left to wait, and it will be small and sweet, made complete by the memories we're gonna make. So tell me how it feels to be alive. Tell me how it feels to feel the tide slipping through your fingers. Know that I won't let you down.
So you can hear the mix sounds pretty good, like it's quite polished, it's almost finished, but to me it feels a little bit cold, a little bit sterile, maybe a bit flat in places, and it feels like it could just use a little bit more depth. And this is where we can bring the tape desk in to add some harmonic saturation, bring the mix together, and just make it feel a little bit more final. So we're going to start with the drums in this case. You'll see that what I have here is a live kit that's been recorded up here, and all of these channels are being fed to this drum bus down here, and these drums sound like this. You also see that I've got a lot of processing going on the drum bus already. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to add the Gem Tape Desk at the end of this chain. So I've got a couple of plugins here as well, which is just a gain plugin and an analyzer, which are not really imparting anything on the signal chain. So I'm just adding the tape desk at the end of the actual processing chain before it goes to that gain plugin and the analyzer. And you'll see in the interface for the tape desk, we have 3 different sections here. I'm not going to break down the complete ins and outs of this plugin. If you do want to know more about exactly what all the features are, I recommend checking out Taylor Danley's video on the Gem Tape Desk, which is on the Ilio YouTube channel currently. He does a great breakdown of this whole plugin. But essentially what we have is a model of the input stage of a console here. So we have the mic preamp of the console, and then that would historically be fed to a tape machine where it would be recorded down. When this is this section here, and then that would be fed back to the mixing console here in this section. So basically we have the input, we have the tape stage, and then we have the return stage here. And we can select different types of consoles. So we have the S4000, we have the N80 and the T88, and all of these are going to impart a different kind of harmonic flavor on the track. And we also have different tape speeds down here. So we have 30 inches per second, 15 inches per second, and 7.5 inches per second. Basically 7.5 inches per second is going to give us like a darker, more full sound in the low end. 30 IPS is going to preserve some of that top end, and then 15 IPS is like somewhere in the middle. So we have a lot that we can play around with. Let me just play you a bit of these drums, dial in some settings and see what sounds good.
Maybe just a few years left to wait, and it will be small and sweet, made complete by the memories. Feels to be alive. Tell me how it feels to feel the tide slipping through your fingers. Know that I won't ever cut me loose. Just know that I'll be waiting here for you, and I will lay my restless heart on you tonight. You don't know, saving up for a place for us.
You can hear there, like when I solo the drums, that 7.5 IPS feels kind of dark. It feels like a bit lo-fi. But when we put it in with the context of the mix, it really helps to get the cymbals and the top end shine of the drums out of the way of the vocal, out of the way of the acoustic guitars. It feels like he just gives the whole thing a bit more space. And I feel as well like he's helping that snare pop out a little bit more. So I really like those settings. We're using like the S4000, driving the input a bit, really kind of pushing that tape saturation, and then using the 7.5 IPs just to knock some of that like top end shine off of the drums and help them sit in the mix a little bit more. So I think that sounds really good. So let's move on to the vocals. Again, I'm not going to break down the whole processing chain I've got going on this lead vocal, but I'm going to insert the Gem tape desk again at the end of the chain like I did with the drums. It's worth saying that if you really wanted to emulate the kind of analog workflow, you probably would want to insert this as the first plugin in the chain. So you would be treating it as if it was the signal was coming into the input stage of a console, then it was going to the tape and it was coming back, and then you would do your compression and your EQ after that. But I'm not necessarily trying to emulate the complete analog workflow here. I'm just trying to impart a bit more character. So in this case, I'm just adding it at the end of the chain just to get a bit more finalizing going on. So let's take a listen to this lead vocal and see what we can do with the tape desk to impart a bit more character on that.
Oh, I've been saving up for a place for us. Maybe just a few years left to wait. And it will be small and sweet and made complete by the memories we're gonna make. Oh, I've been saving up for a place for us. Maybe just a few years left to wait. And it will be small and sweet and made complete by the memories we're gonna make. So tell me how it feels to be alive. Tell me how it feels to feel the tide slipping through your fingers. Know that I won't let you down. And darling, if you ever cut me loose, just know that I'll be waiting here for you. And I will let my restless heart on you tonight. You don't.
Nice. I feel like this N80 setting on the vocal really helps push the mid-range forward a little bit more, and the tape saturation is adding some compression, which is kind of gluing it in place. So we're giving it a bit more push, a bit more compression, but not so much that it's like popping out of the mix. I think this is what I really like about the tape saturation and this character that's being imparted on it, is that it's, although it's popping it out more, it doesn't feel out of place. It still feels like it's kind of within the mix and glued in with the rest of the instruments, which is really nice. I'm using the 15 IPs. 7.5 IPs felt too dark to me. It felt like we kind of lost the vocal. And 30 IPs feels like almost too much shine in that vocal. So I think the 15 IPs is helping just to take some of that super airiness off the top end of the vocal and help it sit in the mix a little bit more. And we're giving it a little bit of a mid-range push with the N80 console setting, which is kind of finalizing that vocal and just rounding it off a little bit more. So lastly, what I want to try now is to add the tape desk to the mix bus, which I think is just going to help bring the whole thing together. You'll see I do have some saturation going on already, but I'm going to add the tape desk again at the end. And I'm going to start by turning off the mic pre and turning off the console section in this case, and just using the tape section to see if we can kind of glue the mix together a bit more, add a bit more excitement to it, and see what that sounds like. So let's take a listen to that.
Oh, I've been saving up for a place for us. Maybe just a few years left to wait. And it will be small and sweet and made complete by the memories we're gonna make. So tell me how it feels to be alive. Tell me how it feels to feel the tide slipping through your fingers. Know that I won't let you down. And darling, if you ever cut me loose, just know that I'll be waiting here for you. And I will let my restless heart on you tonight. You don't know, saving up for a place for us. Maybe just a few years
Cool. Again, I really like this N80 thing. I feel like in some ways I'm thinking, is the N80, the push from that console emulation, a little bit too much? Is it too much harmonic saturation? Too kind of exciting? It might be, but in this case, I like it. I think it sounds good. I felt like the 15 IPS was just losing some of the detail in the percussion and the acoustic guitars. The 7.5 IPS was way too dark. So 30 is nice there because it preserves the kind of top end detail in the left and the right, particularly with the percussion and the acoustic guitar, like I say. And we're just adding a little bit of tape saturation and compression, which is just finalizing that mix. So let's take a listen now with the tape desk on and off all of those 3 tracks. I'm going to select the mix bus, the drum bus, and I'm going to go to the lead vocal as well. And I'm just going to turn those plugins off as we go and see what difference they've made to the mix itself. So let's have a listen to that.
Oh, I've been saving up for a place for us. Maybe just a few years left to wait, and it will be small and sweet, made complete by the memories we're gonna make. So tell me how it feels to be alive. Tell me how it feels to feel the tide slipping through your fingers. Know that I won't let you down, darling. If you ever caught me loose, just know that I'll be waiting here for you, and I will lay my restless heart on you tonight. You don't know what you do to me, do you, darling? You don't know what you do to me, do you, darling?
Cool. It sounds really good. Just adding it to a few key elements like we have done here, the mix bus, the drums, the vocal. It's doing so much to kind of impart a totally different and more pleasing character on the whole mix. You know, I feel like we started out with something, like I said at the top of this video, this recorded directly into an interface digitally with no analog signal chain, and it sounds a bit cold, it sounds a bit sterile, but the tape desk has done an incredible job of just bringing more dimension to this and just making it sound more pleasant to me. You know, I feel like what I would say about the Gem Tape Desk is there's hundreds of plugins out there that do kind of the tape saturation thing, and I own a lot of them. And I find a lot of the time they're just way too subtle. Like, you have to really lean in. Is it doing anything? Is it not? But for me, the Gem Tape Desk is doing something. It's obvious. And I really think that the sound of it is unique, and the character that it imparts is very unique. And I always find it to be really pleasing. And like I say, you don't have to, you could strap this across the whole mix. You could have it on every channel and really go for that kind of analog emulation. But even just adding it to a few key elements is doing an obvious thing that's really making a difference, and really, to my ears, making it sound much more pleasing. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't checked out the Gem Tape Desk, go and do it now. Chuck it on your mix and see what you can do with it. I guarantee you it's going to give you a much more pleasing sound. If you feel like your tracks are kind of too digital, too sterile, the Gem Tape Desk is definitely going to help you out in that regard. So go and check it out if you haven't already. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you soon.